Welcome to The One Inside, an internal family systems podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Sollenberger. I'm excited that you and all of your parts have taken time to be with me and all of my parts. If you are a coach, a client, a therapist, if you are in business or education, and you're curious about the IFS model, you are in the right place. Now, let's see what happens on today's podcast. Hey everyone. On today's podcast, I am speaking with Radhalisa Zarzuela and Deran Young. Radhalisa and Deran work together in a level 1 training in Harlem, and Deran wanted to get her on the podcast to share her story and her experience. And I'm so glad she did because she shares so much of her heart and it's really touching, and I felt super inspired by her, and I think you guys will too. We talk about the rules, I'm putting those in quotes, the rules that may come from our cultures and the legacy burdens we carry. We talk about code switching as a person of color. We talk about the impact of domestic violence and the power of coming out of this with trauma residue, but also with a really powerful and really strong voice. And lastly, we talk about being in the Miss America pageant. I bet you didn't think I was going to say that, but we have a good, fun conversation about that. This may be the last in the minority mental health series for this month. We're having a little bit of scheduling issues, so I'm not sure that we're going to do a last one, but we might have that person on with Deran in the future. I'm not sure, but I will try to get that out to you at some point. I will be giving you an episode in August, and so you'll have one episode in August with my super special guest, and then we'll be back to every other week podcasts in September. Hope everyone's doing well. I'd love to hear from you. Drop me a line at IFS Tammy on Instagram or at the One Inside Facebook page on Facebook. I hope everyone's doing well. Enjoy the rest of your summer, and we'll talk soon. Hi. Why don't you tell me first just where you're from and where you live now, and if you were to look out a window, what you would see, just as that would orient us to where you are.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Jamaica, Queens, New York. And for quite the time, I lived in Astoria, but now I currently live in Ozone Park. And so like right now, I'm literally looking out the window, but I'm by the backside of the house. And so I see all the houses from my neighborhood, and then just straight ahead, I see the train station and the train running, and it's cloudy outside. I was looking forward to going out, but I'm just kind of like, I don't know, it's hot and it's cloudy. I don't know how I feel about that.
I know. Have you been able to get out of your house at all?
So Monday through Fridays is a little complicated because I am working full time. And so it makes it difficult because there are days where I start at 9 or at 10 and I don't end till 6:30. So by the time I'm done, I am just super drained. Like I'm just done. So I rest, I watch some Netflix sometimes. If I'm in the mood to work out, I work out, but usually I'm just like, I'm done. I should go outside and take a nice breather, but by the time that I feel or think about it, I'm like, oh, no, it's okay. I'll just relax on my bed or the couch.
Yeah. So I have two questions. One is, what are you watching on Netflix?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one is, what do you do during the day?
Besides work?
Yeah, well, what do you do for work? Tell me what you're doing for work. But I also really want to know what you're watching on Netflix.
Oh my gosh. So I'm super, super obsessed with The Office. So I'll rewatch it, and I'm like on the 3rd season right now. I just love it. It makes me laugh so much. And like when I feel like my day is so like, I'm like, let me just look at The Office because I know it's gonna I'm just gonna crack up, and that makes me feel good.
Good. That's
And as
great.
far as for work, I am a mental health counselor, and I work for a nonprofit organization known as Steps to End Family Violence that Deran knows. And what I do is I provide individual and group counseling to survivors of intimate partner violence. But specifically, I'm working with female identified youth from the ages of 13 to 24.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow. That have
Mhm.
been through this violence.
Yeah, through everything.
Mm.
So it's a lot of trauma day in and day out. And then on top of that, with what's going on in this world, it's kind of like, where do I go?
To The Office on Netflix.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's my escape. And I've
Yeah.
been reading a lot too, so that's a good thing. I've started to pick up on reading.
Good. What are you reading?
Becoming, Michelle Obama, of course.
Mm,
I'm currently in a book club on Facebook, a therapy book club, and I'm reading The Body Keeps the Score. It has taken me so long to read this book, but I
yeah.
was so intrigued. I really wanted to know about it, so I've been reading that. And I think the other book is called The Secret.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and so I'm like, oh my god, I have 3 books and I haven't finished one. I'm the type of person that when I start something, I have to finish it, or I feel very like, oh, I didn't accomplish it. But I'll
Yeah.
get to it eventually.
Well, you really have to work on those parts because I used to have a part like that, especially around books. And
Mm-hmm.
so this is what will happen. I'd start reading a book, and if I didn't really like it, I'd start watching Netflix. And then
Yeah.
I'm like, why am I watching so much TV? Oh, it's because I'm avoiding reading this book. But I have like a rule that you can't start another book if you haven't finished that book. So I was like, okay, something has to give.
Yeah.
So I had to work with that part.
I wonder if that's like a controlling part or a man. For me, at least, like I think about it, I'm like, is that just me being very bossy towards myself and having to maintain that control? You know,
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think I have so many parts to work on.
Yeah,
For
that's a
sure.
trailhead for you. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Mine was about like my mom, and because I can hear it even right now that like that's you don't want to be one of those people. Oh, those people that don't finish your books. Like you don't want to wear white before Labor Day. Like it's that stupid.
Hmm.
No, sorry, but
Yeah.
if you like that rule, that's fine. But these sort of like rules that actually don't even make any sense. That
Yeah.
like if you start something, you have to finish it. I mean,
Right.
in general, I guess that's a good rule, but
Yeah. Yeah. I don't
yeah,
know. For
I know.
me, it's just like anxiety provoking if I don't finish. And it's, yeah. And I can go back and look into my own childhood history and know that's coming from my father,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
And
yeah.
there we go.
There you go. Right.
Mhm.
Can I just chime in here? I've been enjoying y'all's conversation so much. I'm so glad Tammy does a great job of editing because I just talk all over the place. But y'all were inspiring me because I was like, it's white supremacy culture. That's what it is. It's white
That
supremacy culture. Like domination, like finishing,
too.
you know? And like
Yeah.
Right,
I
Dren.
start lots of things all the time, every day, and I love it.
Right,
It's
tell
not
me about
about
that.
like
Tell me about
it's not
that.
about like it's not goal oriented. It's not goal directed or driven, or it's like I'm experiencing. I'm just taking in the experience of whatever I'm doing. And when I no longer enjoy it, guess what? That means I'm done with this experience.
Mm-hmm.
That is more of an indigenous culture. That's what feels true to my African,
Yeah, yeah.
heritage. And like when I talk to other African women and like in Africa, I just love the spirit of Africa. It's just so allowing and accepting and flowing and like just energy, you know what I mean? Just appreciating and being with the land and being with people, being with the multiple generations, like our elderly population. And I guess I'm sensitive to this today because my African roommate just left. And I'm like, but my wise part feels like he just walked out the door.
Oh,
I always have some
wow.
kind of drama on this podcast.
I like it though. Well, and you've also talked
like
about you have a hard time when people leave. Like when people leave, when they
Yes.
walk out
Yeah.
the door, that's hard for you too.
Yeah. Because my mom would leave a lot. So I do think there's like the personal parts that we have. And then there's the legacy burden. And like Radha was saying earlier, like everyday life and then this, it's like you
Yeah.
have the normal stresses of life. And then you have systemic oppression on top of that. and it all gets mixed in. You don't even know like what came first, the chicken or the egg. It's like, I just been swimming in this for so many generations. We've been swimming in this, and it's been in our DNA for so many generations that you constantly ask yourself, like, why is this a rule? And you don't even know why.
Yeah. And you don't even realize it is a rule until you're like, wait, why am I watching so much TV? I don't want to watch so much TV. Or why am I not reading? I have 100 books. Why am I not reading? Oh, it's because I'm not allowed to not finish a book. I didn't even know that was a rule until I had this. Then there was like a feeling that didn't feel good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that was just really resonating with me.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, and I know, Deran, you and I talked about time just one-on-one, and it didn't really even dawn on me that was a cultural thing.
That's so funny that you say that, Tammy, because a lot of people in the IFS community say that, and I'm like, how, Sway? Like, you never heard it? Like, where you been? Radha, are you familiar? Don't you feel like this concept of time is very cultural, or no? Am I wrong? Is it just me?
Absolutely. And I think I have a also very anxious part with time, because I feel like when I'm being restricted or like I'm close to time, it's like, oh my God, I'm like all over the place. But there's also this part of me that's like, oh, well, you have to be on time and you got to make sure you do things accordingly and organized. But it definitely I think culture plays a huge part.
So would you say your culture is like time, being on time, and is it making use of time or being on time? And if you're not, is that disrespectful, or like what's the message in your culture about that?
I can't speak for a lot of or most Dominican people.
For yourself, yeah, sorry. Yeah, speak for your whole entire culture right now. Yeah.
For me. I think the biggest reason why I've struggled with time is because since little, and when my dad came from the Dominican Republic to here to the United States, my life changed completely. And so there was a point growing up where my mom would always call me or text me, hurry up, you got to be here before your dad gets here. And so it just created so much anxiety for me all the time. So now I feel like every time I'm timed or I'm asked, well, when are you getting home, or what are you doing, or what time? And I'm like, I blow up, because don't ask me about what time. No. Me too. So I think when I arrive to places, obviously not like professional settings, right? I'm more responsible there. But let's say if it was like family functions or like my friends are waiting for me, I think they know the deal. Like, oh, don't press Radhalisa on time because she's gonna come when she comes. But with the family, I do get sometimes. My mom is always on me with the whole like, oh, why didn't you come on time? And like it's showing kind of like, in a sense, like I don't care, but it's not that I don't care. It's just that feeling of having to feel that pressure of, oh my God, I have to be there at this certain time because someone is telling me to be there at that time.
Radha, how was it before you said so? Before you moved here, do you remember how it was, or do you remember what it felt like before?
Oh, it was so peaceful. My grandfather raised me. That's who I thought, I viewed as my father. For the first 8 years of my life, because we lived together. He raised me. He raised another cousin of mine that I see as my brother. And then little babies started, growing more. My family grew much more, but it was just me and my grandfather all the time. And so I just remember it being a calm, a very healthy home. Like I felt so loved by him. And like he would always pick me up from school. Like I always look forward to being with my grandpa.
So he had time for you.
Yeah, this is my mom's dad. Well, may he be resting in glory and everything. But yeah, my grandfather meant so much. Still, even though he's not with us, but he means so much to me. So I always remember that, like, oh, I'm gonna hold on to what my grandfather taught me. But then when my dad came at 8 years old, my life shifted and changed completely. And so, yeah, that was something that I had to adjust, and it wasn't great. It was very like, I went from healthy, loving, caring, letting me be and play and jumping on the couches and just being me, to this person, fearful, afraid, the next time worrying when I was going to get hit again, when was he going to start arguing with my mom, like all this stuff, like that I had to go through as a kid and my siblings. And then I remember even taking it out on my sister, because, you know, as a kid, like you're seeing an adult treating you this way, let alone your parent. And then it's like, you don't know how to express that frustration or talk to, and I would talk and fight with my mom. And I'd always say like, why did you bring him here? Why did you do this? But, you know, fast forward, I'm 27 now?
When we talk about diversity, we rarely talk about the differences of ages, you know, like age groups.
Yeah.
There's so much rich diversity with the next generation, I feel like. There's so many legacy burdens that are being lifted, you know, and legacy gifts are being restored. So, like, I love the fact that you're like, I can acknowledge that my father was critical. Right. I can acknowledge that it impacted me, you know, and that's something that I can start to look at, like that's a trailhead. Yeah. To see how that shows up in my life, so that I don't have to spread it out to the people around me, right, or to any, you know, future generations that I may be influencing. Like, you're doing the work, and what a privilege it is to do this work. I'm always grateful for the legacy gifts. So I was just resonating with you on some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious about when your mom so your mom brought you here with your dad?
No. So I was born and raised here.
Oh, okay.
Here. My dad was in the Dominican Republic.
Oh, okay.
To come, right? So again, my life was with my grandfather, my mom, my aunt, my cousin. That was what I knew. And I remember when my dad came, I saw the door, he was strolling in, and I'm like, I know this man. Because we would visit, we would go to DR since I was young, like every year. We go see my dad. And I'm like, I know this man. And then I looked at him and I'm like, oh, Dad. And I just ran up to him and I hugged him or whatever. And then this is when I knew my life was going to change. I think I was drinking like coconut water or something with the can, right? And so you know how the
tab
part? Yeah. Yep. So I went inside and I was trying to get it out. And I'm a kid. So obviously I cut my finger. And I started crying and I run to my dad and I'm like, Dad, oh my God, look, I got cut. And he's like, well, why were you doing that? So when I just saw that reaction, look, I still get like, oh my God, I get goosebumps. When I remember that, I was just kind of like, oh my God. In my heart, I just knew my life was so, like, not over, but it was like, oh God, this is not going to be what I know.
Yeah.
And, but, you know, time has healed all wounds and, you know, I love my dad. Like, he is still someone, I feel like I'm so loving and forgiving towards him because it's all I've ever wanted from him, you know, and, but he's changed a lot. He has changed so much. And now I'm an adult. So it's kind of like, you know, little by little, you see how the roles start reversing. Not that I'm going to be the parent, but it's more of like, okay, now they're not getting any younger, right? And so, yeah. And as the oldest, I feel like a lot of responsibilities are going to come my way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How is it for you working with a population that's pretty close to your own experience growing up?
It's extremely difficult at first, especially when I started at Steps. It was like I was an intern, and luckily I was hired, and at the same time through a client, right? Because when you're in a toxic or an abusive relationship, you don't something's wrong, but you don't realize it because one, it's normal, right? I grew up seeing that. My dad, the way my dad treated my mom, the way I was being treated. And ironically, I ended up with someone who literally was copy and paste my dad. And so it wasn't until I was in a session with a client, and till this day, I cannot remember those 2 exact words that she said, but it was like a light bulb went on my head. And I'm like, oh my God, this person tells me the same thing. And it was like I was so in shock. So it's when I realized, I'm like, oh, fuck. I, I'm in an abusive relationship. It was just like I opened my eyes.
Like the scales were taken off your eyes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was very hard because those were the moments where I went through the hardest things, and I questioned myself a lot, and I questioned the work because I felt for a long time there was a part of me that felt hypocritical for doing this work. Because I was like, how can I sit here, listen to these women, guide them, support them when I'm going back home to the same exact thing?
Yeah.
And so, but thank God I'm no longer in that relationship. And so, but there's that. I think that I've heard this term before, and I use it because I'm like, that's what I identify, that trauma residue. That there's these things that still till this day trigger me, and even though I'm still in the journey of healing, there's still certain things that are very, impactful for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But overall, the fact that I switched over to working with teens, I think has been the best decision I've ever made, because I feel like when I can work with the youth and I get with the young ones, it's like prevention and experience and learning, and this is why you can't end up in a situation like this. Let me show you these types of abuse and let me teach you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's so interactive, and they're so receptive, especially with the clients that I've been working with.
Well, and talk about changing legacies, right? You're working with teenagers and doing some huge change in their lives that will change, hopefully, like the path of their lives.
Right.
Do you want to talk a little bit about, since we're talking about your work, do you want to talk about how you're using the model to help clients navigate unhealthy, violent relationships and cultural barriers?
I can briefly talk about it because I think even though thankfully, and I'm so so grateful that I was able to do the IFS training, level 1. I'm not going by the book, right? But there are moments where I think unconsciously I'm doing the work and the client is doing the work too.
Yeah.
And because they're always mentioning, there's this part of me that feels this, and there's this other part of me that feels that, and I'm like, yeah, let's see let's connect with that. Let's stay in tune with that part of you. Like, how does it feel for you? Like, how is it showing up in your body? So it's like I'm literally doing the work, and I don't realize it until I'm done with the session, and I'm like, oh my God, I just did IFS.
Yay, I know. I know when your client doesn't know anything about IFS and they start talking, part of me gets so giddy. I'm like, yay!
Yeah. And so I'm super excited because I'm working with a new client now, and I think IFS would be perfect for her. And I was explaining to her what IFS is, and at first she was looking at me like, what is that, Radhalisa? What are you talking about? All types of weird. I'm like, trust me.
It's weird. Yeah.
It's gonna be life-changing. It's gonna be, I think it's something that's gonna help you so much. Because also she is someone who is struggling. She got out of a very toxic, very horrible, abusive relationship, and now she's with another person, and she's noticing a lot of the similar traits. And it's kind of like, okay, no, we got to use IFS in here because something's got to give. But I'm fully on. It's all about, for me, with my clients, is really being present for them, being able to hear them, have lots of compassion, lots of understanding and care for them. And it's just, I love the work that I do. I do. And at first it was very difficult, but with time I've learned that, I've even healed through this work.
Yeah.
And why would I not want my clients to also feel that?
Yeah. I tell my clients it's weird, but one of my clients I've seen forever and ever and ever and ever. I haven't seen her for 5 years. And so I saw her yesterday for the first time, and she doesn't know anything about IFS, and we did an amazing piece of work. And at the end, she was like, IFS is magical. And I was like, yeah, it is. It's weird, but it is magical.
I love it. I remember, I can't say his last name, so maybe Deran, you can help me with this one. But Paul Newstack. Yes. He changed my life. There, when we're doing demos, so I was so scared. I was like, oh my God, I'm about to be a client in front of the whole steps program. OMG. But I went because I was like, listen, there's a part of me that was just like, Radhalisa, go, just do it and experience it and feel what IFS is. And again, I adore Paul. He is amazing. The way he led the whole session, it was just so like, oh my God. Like I remember closing my eyes and envisioning myself literally having conversations with my parts.
Yeah.
And I remember even acting them out. Like I remember so vividly, there was a part of me that was like a superwoman. And I just remember going like this, like, oh, there's this superwoman coming that she wants to, have me and put me all together and for me to feel that I can do it all. Mm-hmm. And then there were parts of me that were like, the trauma parts, the sad part, the hurt, the painful parts.
Well, there's something really special about embodying that. So what Radha just did is sort of put her chest out like a superhero would do. But there's something really powerful when you embody those parts.
Oh yeah, that felt great. And then when it got to the, the more painful parts, it was just kind of like, oh my God, I felt like I was exposing myself. Like, again, I for a while after I started, I forgot that I was even in front of the STEPS program. I just focused so much on Paul's voice and his direction on, how to guide me with this and how to speak to my parts and ask them to step back because I needed to befriend the angry part of me. And I came out of that session feeling so like, wow, relieved. And I'm like, oh my God, IFS is amazing. I need to do this. I need to be part of IFS. Like, this is amazing. And even in that one session, obviously I wasn't fully healed, but I just felt like, wow, I got to know parts of me that I was so afraid of bringing to surface and connecting with.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that Deran said, and it's interesting she used this word or this phrase, because she used it in a Instagram post, maybe today or maybe yesterday, I don't know, about code switching.
Yes.
Do you remember that you did that, Deran?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I'll have to find it.
Yeah.
No, I don't really even remember when it was. I feel like it was recently, and I thought, wow, that is such an interesting term. And I remember. Do you remember when we talked about? And I don't know if this is a racist term or not, but Ebonics. Do you remember when we talked about that was a big thing like in the 90s?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Am I getting that right? Where it was like, so if you're black or you're brown, you have to speak white, and sort of there's this language.
Mm.
Do you remember that?
No,
that's okay.
I don't believe in speaking white. I don't believe in centering whiteness at all. Like, there is no speak white. There is American English. There's the British English. There is French. Like, there is no language called white.
Well, you said this thing about code switching, and it was
code switching is a real thing, and it's a part that helps us navigate whiteness.
Okay.
It's in a way that we have adapted, like Radhalisa was, I know for me, I'll speak for my own parts. I grew up in poverty with my single mother who was teen single. My mom was a single mother at 16. We lived in the projects. And then my grandmother would all of a sudden have a conscience and say, no, they shouldn't be suffering this way. And the next day I would wake up in a country club, gated community area. And I quickly realized that I wasn't going to fit in if I talked like I did in the projects. And all the rules that went with surviving in the projects were no longer valid or no longer as helpful in this new environment.
Wow. And so one of those is how you spoke. That was one of them. Okay.
Right. So I learned how to, I guess, develop different parts that were needed in different environments. Mm. And I think about that a lot for people who are either first generation, born in America. I married an African man, and when he comes here, he's like, people are telling me to speak English. They don't even speak English. Like they don't speak like the Queen of England. Which English, So.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. We have to develop, as people of color and as a Black person, Black woman specifically for me, I think we develop so many parts. And that's why I love IFS for us. Because there are so, like, the parts are uncountable. You know, all the many ways that we've shape-shifted. And out of survival, not because we wanted to, you know, it's like, this is a human need at that point.
Right.
Radha, I'm wondering about how you have to help clients code shift when they are bilingual, or how that shows up for you in your work that you're doing
You
with
know,
people of different cultures.
yeah. I mean, for me, my native language is Spanish. That was my first language. So I had to, even though I was born and raised here, I had to learn English and go through ESL and all those things. But talk about having to present yourself in a way where, even, I had this thought before even doing the podcast, where I was like, I think my anxiety, my nervousness was coming from the idea of like, oh my God, I have to sound articulate. I have to sound coherent. I have to sound smart. I have to learn how to, I've never done this, you know? So it was like all these underlying fears for me.
Yeah.
And I was like, I gotta make sure I do good or sound good, you know?
Be good, right? Do good, do good.
Do good, be good, sound good, look good, everything good. And but imagine for someone who speaks another language, and there goes my Spanish, right? Especially for Dominicans, we've been known to speak. I think we were at a point, I think I came across an article a long time ago, I don't remember, or some post. We were rated like the worst Spanish speakers. And so I'm just kind of like, oh, damn, like, ouch, you know, that hurts. Because, I mean, we do have a way of speaking with one another because we're comfortable. We're with our family and we're with our friends. So, of course, like for me, my Dominican side is going to show up. And I feel like that's even a part of me showing up. And I noticed that too when I'm working with my clients. A lot of Spanish speaking clients. I know a lot of, I work with many Mexican women or Puerto Rican or Dominican women. I've worked across the stand. But I noticed that or Colombian women too. But I've noticed that every time I'm in a session, I have to, it's hard. It's hard translating and having to sound, imagine I'm struggling having to sound articulate in English, what it is in Spanish, and me having to translate, and then I'm thinking in English and I say it in Spanish, but it comes out wrong, or I'm thinking in Spanish and I'm say it in English, and it's like, oh my God, what did I just say? What did I just tell this client? But it's the idea of like, I have to sound professional in this, you know, I'm myself, and there are moments where I catch my Dominican side coming up, because it's kind of like, you gotta be your transparent self. You gotta be your full self. Like, your client is coming to you being their full self, and they're, you know, some of them, right, with no education or limited, or, you know, coming from different backgrounds, and they're being their true self. So in the sense, I question that too. Like, why do I have to sound this way? Like, why can't I just speak and be myself especially with Spanish speaking, and it's my first language? Like, I should feel comfortable and speak freely. But it's this idea of like, oh no, you gotta sound polished. You have to look and sound professional, or you're not gonna be credible. You're not gonna be believed when you're telling your client something. So I've had to struggle with that a lot. And it's something that I continuously I'm working on. But yeah, but I see the beautiful side of it is just that I appreciate being bilingual. I really do. Like, I thank my mom. I mean, I thank God, you know, like I just, you know, I'm super grateful that I am, but I have seen and encountered the challenges of having to code switch, because it just feels like I'm not being 100% me. And I don't like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Deran, would you say that's one of the other white supremacy, like, messages that comes down? Okay.
Absolutely. Like, I was going to jump in several times because I heard you say, like, but I can't show my Dominican part, like, that won't be professional. And I was like, I have a voice that says that. Like if you know that you're Black, that's the opposite of professional. And it's just like, where the hell did I get this message? And I know it's as close to me as my nose. Like I'm sure I've been seeing that on TV. I mean, I'm like so scared to let my son watch TV. We hardly watch any TV. He watches YouTube. He has his go-tos. I watch with him. I know what they're going to say because I don't want him being brainwashed into thinking he's less than what he is.
Wow.
I'm like so committed to that. Like, because I'm now unpacking all the ways that this message has been forcefully fed to me, either in schools. You know, how many times do we see Black teachers or brown teachers? You know, it's rare unless you know, really go after that like I did, you know. But it's like everywhere we consider professionals, especially if you grew up in a little town like I did in Texas, the doctors were all white, the dentist was all white, the, you know, secretaries were all white, like everybody professional was white.
Wow.
And so I'm so glad that the next generation is changing the whole damn definition of professional. Like you can work from home and be professional. You can be at the beach and at a meeting at the same time, you know, like that's just, and that's the thing about white supremacy culture. One of the biggest factors of white supremacy culture is perfectionism. Yeah. Like trying to make everything look good all the time. What the hell? That's not reality. Like that's not real life. You know?
Yeah.
You know, good according to who? You know, like who are we going to ask what's good and what's not good?
It's so interesting, Deran, that you mentioned that too. I feel like I'm thinking about it, but I feel this need to share it because I think it's also a disturbing part, and I never understood why I viewed this. But I remember while I was growing up, I would owe my mom or like my grandparents, they would put the Dominican channel, and you would obviously I would see these Dominican women or men that are super professional, but the way they spoke, I was just like, that's not Dominican. They sound so fake. I'm a kid saying this. I'm just like, they don't, you know, but as time, you know, as I grew and I realized, I'm like, oh, and here I am doing the same thing.
Yeah.
I wonder why. Wow. Like, it's just like, wow. Like it was weird to me at a young age for me to even think about or see that.
I also think, Radha, that it's so very smart of us. Like, I'm like, shout out to my parts. I always say that. Because those are the parts that got me to grad school, that got me through, you know what I mean? Like, that's what they needed to do for this system. And they knew, like, you're going to go far if you know how to change your voice. She figured that out real early, and she got really good at it. Yep. So I'm like, well, thank you, you know?
So speaking of going far, I want to hear about being Miss New York.
I was hoping you would find that.
My gosh. Forget grad school. Forget being a therapist.
But I'm like, this is my favorite part.
Yeah, okay, good. I'm like, that's what I really want to talk about.
OMG. Where do I begin? You know, it's so interesting how it came about because I remember seeing, I don't know if you are familiar with the current Miss USA, Chesley Kirst. I hope I'm saying her name correctly. This beautiful woman of, a woman of color, gorgeous, big, curly hair. And I'm like, oh my God. And it was an ad on Instagram and it said, this can be you. Aww. And it's kind of like, and I'm looking and I'm just like, I'm scrolling. Let's say that was a Monday. I'm like, whatever. The next day it pops up again. And the thing with me is that I've always loved beauty pageants. Like I grew up watching it. It was just, I think, something to me that, I don't know, it was some like family would watch it. We were always watching the Miss Universe. And even though, there are a lot of, I guess a lot of like debates and controversy of what a beauty pageant stands for. But I was like, okay. And I don't know what got into me, but there was a little voice that said, do it, Radhalisa, go for it. And I'm like, oh my God, should I not? I applied. I was like,
right, so how old were you when this happened?
This was in January.
This year. Shut up. Okay.
I know.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I wish if I could turn back time, I wish I would have done it earlier because then I would have had another shot to compete again. But I'll tell you about that too.
Okay.
So I applied. Then I started connecting with people that would support me, and I hit up my one of my old bosses. he owns like so many supermarkets. It's bizarre. So I was like, hey, I was so scared to ask him, but he was just like, of course, because the price was ridiculous to be sponsored. And he was like, of course, anything for you. Like, you were such a great and amazing worker. You've worked with us for so long. Of course, I'm going to support you with this. And he was super excited and happy. So once that was done, I went about doing my trainings. I had to do the walking with Lou Sierra, who she's the one who teaches the Miss Universe girls.
Wow. How did you have to wear really high heel shoes?
Literally 6-inch heels. I'm like, I always loved heels, but when I got on those, I was like, OMG, what am I gonna, like, I'm really gonna like bust my behind. I'm gonna fall in these. So it was a lot. It took a lot. So I started training with her, and then I met the actual Miss New York 2018, Genesis Suero, and she was like on me, like on me. Like, when I tell you, like, I gave her a lot of headaches. But I appreciate her so much today. She really was the one who kind of like brushed me up in the end of learning how to do the walk and how to interview for the pageant and all that. And they say that in the interview, they already know who the winner is. So I'm here thinking the interview, you know, I'm like nicely dressed and I'm like, oh, I got this. I'm just going to be myself. Because they also say, be yourself, be your authentic self, right? So I brought myself to the interview. I was just like, I was so nervous. But I thought I even had them laughing. So I was like, okay, this is a good. So I felt leaving out of that interview, I felt really good. I felt like, okay, maybe, who knows? You just never know. But I think my motivation as to even wanting to join, like, of course, every girl I think there wants to win, right? But for me, it was more of like, how can I get my voice heard? And how can I show the women that I work with that no matter what they've been through, because I've been through it too, no, like, if you put your mind to something that you really want to do, you can achieve that and you can go for it. And even if it's scary, even if it's like something so new and rare, but like, I was like, no, I thought about it so much of like, even before I got there, I was like, oh no, I shouldn't do this. I can't, like, I'm not tall enough. I'm not pretty enough. I don't even have the body type, you know, but all that went to, I don't know where. And I was just like, this is going to be my motivation. This is going to be my drive, because I also want to show my teens that this is possible and that they have to, you know, believe in themselves. And another thing that drove me, like, I was, you know, again, being in an abusive relationship, I was made to feel like I was the ugliest person in the world. Like, I was beneath the floor. And so, you know, whether it was comments about my skin color, my hair, like, it was bad. It was pretty bad. And me doing the pageant, I told myself, you know, you don't have to prove anything to those people, Radhalisa. But at the same time, you have to do this for you. Like, it was something about me being me discovering and being this woman that I always envisioned myself to be. And when I tell you, I put that swimsuit, I don't know how I did it. I'm telling you, I think God was with me. I did the swimsuit. I walked and I'm like, imagine there's hundreds of people out there. I can't see, but but you feel it because everyone's like cheering and the lights and everything. And I just walking, and like, I love that video. When I look back at it, I love the swimsuit video, because I was like, oh my God, who is this woman? And then I'm like, oh wait, no, it's me. It's Radha. It's the Radha I've dreamt of for so long. And even more so when I came out with the gown, the evening gown. For me, that was, I looking back, and here's a critical part of me, right? Just me, like, not liking the walk as much as I like the swimsuit walk. But when I saw myself in that gown, and I was the last one, I was number 161 because of my last name. Thank you, Zarzuela, whoever it is, you know. But I was the last one to go. And so a lot, you know, the judges and people have already seen so many girls. And just my gown, like, it has so many like mirrors and from like front and back. And it's just, it fit so perfectly. It was like it looked like I think it was like a mermaid dress. And it was black. But it just, like, I walked out of there, and when I look back at the pictures and the videos, I'm like, oh my God, wow. And I was made to feel and believe that I was ugly, that I was nothing. And I don't want to get emotional, but it's just like me taking that chance transformed me. So even though I didn't place and I didn't obviously get a crown or not, I think I gained so much more. And, for people that really don't know about the beauty pageant world, like I learned that it was hard. It was hard work, really working towards it. But at the same time, it's like you're building yourself, you're building your character, you're building your confidence. And if you go in it with the right intention and the right reasons, I think that's more of a win to me than having this crown and be glorified in that way. Because then I just realized, they're looking for a particular person. Like I don't meet the standards that they want. And a lot of the girls, like, again, many beautiful girls, but they already knew who they were choosing. And it's kind of sad to see how, I mean, again, granted, because again, I'm competing against girls that probably have also done this for their entire life. So I'm like, okay, I got to give them that for sure. Yeah. But majority of the girls that win are either white, or if they are of women of color or African American, they have Eurocentric features.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So if you look, like, I look back and I look at the current Miss New York now, and it's like, I think she's beautiful. She's very beautiful. And this is something that she went back for her crown because she's competed multiple times, and that was her crown. It was meant for her. But if you really look at her features, she has like a thin nose, a small face, perfect lips, or, whatever is beautiful or the standards for the beauty pageant world.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay.
And beauty is in quotes for those of you who can't see it, which is everyone except for me and Deran.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
It was just very transformative for me. And it made me realize, like, I am someone who purposely, I really do have a real passion. And I also kind of discovered that most of the girls say they have a platform and they want to do this and they want to do the other, but they don't really do the work. It's just all about, like, again, beauty. I'm doing cover, like, shoots and for magazines and things like that. But who wouldn't love that? But at the same time, it's like, I'm the kind of person that I know I have a purpose, I have a passion, and I want to follow that. And I thought my naive self that some way, somehow the pageant was gonna help me with that. But it actually has.
It sounds like it.
Yeah, it's really builds up, again, my confidence. Still here and there are moments where I struggle. I'm human. I have my moments of where I don't feel the best at times. But I look back at that and I was like, wow, I cannot believe I did that. That was like the biggest thing I've ever done in my life besides grad school.
I love it. Well, and my guess is, if you're in a domestic violence relationship, you have parts, tell me if I'm wrong, but you have parts that believe what your perpetrator is telling you about yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Because if you're hearing it consistently and to the point where you're also being called the N-word, right? It's hard. Like, again, I'm no longer with the person, but this is where I tell you, like, the residue, right? That trauma residue. I look back at that and it really destroyed me. It really destroyed me. And but again, day to day, I'm working on that. I'm conquering that. And if I didn't believe in myself, and if I didn't bring my whole, compassionate, loving, caring self to do this, courageous too, because you have to have the guts. You really have to have courage to go up on that stage and in front of 100, 200, 300 people.
In a bathing suit, in heels.
Yourself. And in heels, 6-inch heels.
Well, my guess is the part of you that believes that you're damaged looks at that beauty pageant and that girl walking in that bathing suit and those heels and is like, wow, she is not damaged.
Mm-hmm. It was like looking from the outside in and just saying, wow, that girl is amazing. She is beautiful. She is powerful. right?
Yeah.
And that's what I want to portray always. And like, I have little girls. I have my niece looking up to me, and I always encourage her to wear her natural hair, to just be her all the time. And I may not know anyone who I may be impacting or not, but I know some way, somehow I'm making a difference by just being me.
Deran, do you have any beauty pageant questions?
No, I want you to always tell that story, Radha. I was over here crying because I'm like, that's the story that a lot of Black and brown girls need to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this is the one time where I wish that a podcast was a video so that people could see it, you know, like how moved I was. It was just so beautiful. And I've loved Radha. I was her PA.
Yeah.
And and I'm just like, I would leave the training and be like, I love that girl. I just
love you.
This sweetness and this authenticity and this beauty that's deeper than beauty, you know? And so it just brings me to tears sometimes when I think about just how much I admire her as a young woman on the rise. You know, I don't think that this is the end for her at all. I think she has a very bright future. I hope that's not too much pressure, but I just think that she's so talented, so wise, just a lot of self-energy.
Yeah.
A lot of, from the first day I met her, I'm like, this one's interesting.
Well, I think that's a big deal coming from Deran. So, yeah.
I love Deran since the minute she opened her mouth. I was like, who is this woman? And then you discover she's like a super, like a, what is it? No, like a superstar.
Yeah, she's a she's a superstar. She's kind of a superhero, like you.
Oh,
you are also a superhero.
I admire and look up to Deran so much. Like, you know this, Deran. I adore you. I love you, and I'm so grateful that we were able. Like, even though she was my PA and she taught me so much. So grateful for her again, Paul and Deran. I think they stay with me forever, for sure. And I'm so again honored and appreciative of the fact that I still get to have contact with you. Like that to me is just amazing.
Aww.
I'm so grateful I got to meet you, for sure.
Yeah. So this is what I want more of across IFS, these deep connections where it's like, I don't know, we can see past all the parts, you know, and see the human spirit, the self, and connect at that level.
Yeah.
You know, and it was interesting to me. Another thing we don't talk about when we talk about diversity is I'm this Texas girl, and I'm fascinated by New York girls. Like, my little Texas girls are like, oh, you know? There's never a time that I've been to New York, and I've been to New York at least probably 30 times now. Every time I'm driving through New York or riding through New York, my eyes are open, and I'm just like the little girl who's so starry-eyed by it all. And I'm like, they grew up in this. Like, they just know so much, and like there's this whole nother world that opened up to me. So going out to Harlem as a PA, I was just fascinated by y'all because y'all would say things, especially when it comes to anti-oppression.
Mm-hmm.
They would say things that I'm like, ooh, that could get you killed in Texas. I like it. That might get you tamed by the police in Alabama, you know?
Wow.
Like, they were boldly saying things that I'm like, oh, I didn't even know we could say that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's unfortunate that like middle America and the deep South, I think are still very far away. Like, New York is kind of leading the way in so many ways, whether you talk about COVID, mm-hmm. whether you talk about like just, you know, acceptance and differences and diversity. Like, there's something so magical to me about New York, and doing that training there with y'all was just with y'all.
Yes. Thank God.
Like, I can bring my Texas, you know, and she could scoop up some Harlem. You know? And not in a way where it was like cultural appropriation, but like a deep respect and appreciation. You know what I mean? Because I know it doesn't come easy. Like, living in New York is not easy. And that's, you know, I had to take off my starry glasses and see, like, most of the people don't live in Manhattan if they're Black and brown. You know, my AC just stopped working, and I had to remember that the guy I was dating in Brooklyn, he don't have no AC. You know what I mean? Every day. And my white friends are like, oh my God, you can't live like that. I'm like, by the way, there are other people living like this every day. Yeah. Every day, right here in America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so that compassion that like we can have across differences is so important to me.
Mm-hmm.
Love that.
Yeah.
What I love what you just said too is the hope that you give for Black and brown girls that they could be in beauty pageants if they want to. They can go get grad degrees if they want to. Who do they want to be? And how many girls across the world don't know that, don't believe that? That's not part of what they're told or taught. And so you both are such an example of that, and giving that to young girls is so, it's like you're superheroes because you're superheroes to them.
Mm.
We're all superheroes to somebody, I hope, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for hanging out today. If you liked this episode, make sure you subscribe. And if you really like this episode, share it with a friend and leave a review. You can follow me on Instagram at IFS Tammy and join our community on Facebook at the One Inside Podcast. Talk to you next time. Today's episode was sponsored by Brighter Vision. What's the point of having a beautiful website if it doesn't attract the clients you want to see? As the worldwide leaders of website design for therapists, Brighter Vision sees this issue happen way too often. A nice-looking website doesn't equate to a successful website. The truth is, your current website might even be turning off potential clients. That's where Brighter Vision comes in. Brighter Vision's team of website designers will create a website that is centered around attracting and retaining your ideal client so that you can have a nice-looking website as well as a successful one. Better yet, Brighter Vision is offering $100 off exclusively for listeners of the One Inside podcast. To take advantage of this offer, simply go to brightervision.com/inside. Again, that's brightervision.com/inside.